This episode includes the discussion of sensitive topics related to mental health and may be activating for some viewers. We encourage you to take care of yourself. For support and resources, please visit beam.community/gethelpnow.
Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Yolo.
And I'm Natalie.
And this is Black Healing Remixed, the podcast.
Well, really, the opportunity is to think about what does sex and what does intimacy do in a relationship, right? What does that do to our emotional wellness? And, you know, obviously we ain't always dating probably the best people we should be dating.
Speak for yourself.
Speak for yourself, okay. I am not always. I statements, I get it, okay. You know, I think when we look back at our dating history, our lovers, the people that we've been intimate with, sometimes there's a lot of distress that comes out of these unstable relationships. A lack of communication, a lack of clarity and transparency. I know that in my early 20s, dating was a hot mess, right? And as I've gotten older, I've been able to make better choices, but that doesn't mean that there's not stuff that comes up in the context of dating, relationships, and sex. And so how do we talk about our mental health in connection to the lovers we take?
I know.
Or the choices we make to not take?
I know. I would love to begin this conversation with thinking about what are some of the primary factors that lead us to choose partners we choose. I'm thinking about, like, you know, from a psychological perspective, right? Like how we often are attracted to people who often imbue patterns or behaviors that are similar to those of the primary caregivers we grew up around. Right?
Meaning we dating the people that are like our family, like our parents, right?
Or the people who raised, it might be an auntie, it might be like an uncle.
Of course,
whoever,
extended family, whoever is the
us.
people that brought you up.
Yeah.
Sometimes that becomes the comfort, the norm for us. And if we're not working to unpack that, then oftentimes it shows up in our romantic relationships.
Right, because we kind of, we embody what has been modeled for us.
Absolutely.
Right, and so we often sometimes will take on the roles of one of the primary caregivers, or sometimes, you know, in different dynamics. And some of those dynamics, unfortunately, aren't always healthy, aren't always loving. And if you don't have the skills, tools, or resources to be able to discern, like, why am I attracted to these kinds of people? Why am I choosing these people? It's not just attraction, because we attracted a whole bunch of people, but who do I choose? I think that's the important piece. Like, and why do I keep choosing them? And what is that about for me?
And I think the additional layer, and I think, you know, as a person who has been cultured as a woman, it's actually not been taught to me that I get to choose, but that it's actually about me being chosen. And so who likes me best? Right? And so sometimes it's the love bombing, right? It's the person who will be obsessed with you, which we obviously in later years, you realize, like, whoa, that is not it, right? But in my early 20s and my teens, it was whoever showed me the most attention. Yeah. Then I was like, oh, I got to date this person. Oh, they like me. I'm obligated to like them back simply because they like me, as opposed to what I learned later where I get to choose. Yeah. And also, what does that mean, right? When we do get to choose and we are aware of that, what is the societal pressure that comes with you better choose the right thing, right? And all of those layers.
And it's so different for you as a woman as me as a queer person, right? Like receiving like none to zero messaging around relationships and dynamics, right? Like, I mean, I can look at my relationship history and see clear delineations connected to, you know, the people who raised me. I can see how one partner in particular, you know, in that relationship, I walked on eggshells around him. He had an explosive temper. But that felt familiar to what I grew up with.
Yeah, you're like, I know how to navigate this.
And so, and also as in my own little inner child was deeply in that relationship, because, you know, as a child, I thought I was responsible for the anger of the adults in my life. That it was something because I was bad, why they were kind of like explosive. And so in the relationship, I found myself in this dynamic with this man where he was explosive all the time and I felt responsible. And he, through his own stuff, made me responsible for every explosive moment he had. And so here I am caught up in this trauma bond, essentially, right? where it feels, and I think one thing people talk about, like you can be in these really quote unquote, what people say toxic dynamics, but they also feel like home and they feel familiar.
Absolutely.
They feel like the shame, They can feel the unpredictability of them, the way they waver and like it's up and down. That wave can be something you can become very enmeshed in and like and crave in some ways.
And give you purpose.
Right.
In many ways. If you don't have other things that feel pressing and important and compelling, now this drama and now this churning in the relationship becomes the thing that gives you purpose. Oh, well, I know I have to call them at this time because if I don't, they get upset. Right? All of these different pieces where it's like, that's a dynamic. And when we look back, there's probably a connection between the dynamics that we're currently experiencing or maybe previously experiencing to our home life.
Yep. And I mean, like for me, also another dynamic was the senior relationships is I learned very early on that to appease and dismiss my experience in the favor of men's anger. Right? That if men were angry, then like it didn't matter what I felt. It was really what they needed.
I mean, I hear you on this one because for me, it's about safety. If a man gets angry, what is my physical safety like? So I just de-escalate to be safe and I'll circle back when I got a strategy about how I'm going to do this and navigate this, right? And so I think many of us are cultured in this way of like, if a man particularly is upset, now it becomes a physical threat. And that becomes the dominating thing or the dominating voice. Doesn't matter actually what the logistics of the situation were. If I'm legitimate in feeling whatever, because we know our feelings are valid, right? Even if the dynamics are murky, how I feel is actually valid, equally yours too. But we know that doesn't always play out when we think about gender, when we think about physical size, when we think about and strength and all of those different things, it gets muddy.
Yeah. It does get muddy. I think about the ways in which there were men in my community who had tempers, which I think connected to depression and a lot of other things they were navigating, right? Pressures in society. But the ways also I was taught very early on to dismiss and pretend like it's not as bad as you think it is. And I see that with a lot of families I work with, like communities we work with, is that it's like you have... It's not always just a man, it's not his mom, it's whoever. But like the coping strategy is to pretend that it's not that bad. And then like ending up in relationships where you learn to gaslight yourself the same way you were gaslit by the people around you, to be like, it's not that bad when he or she or they is doing something abusive, harmful, hurtful to you. Because it becomes the threshold and standard, right? I think that's an important piece too to name. When you're raised and reared in volatile environments, your threshold for what constitutes pain and harm is different from someone who may not be in the same volatility. Like if you're raised in a family and community where people cursing and throwing things is the standard, then like your baseline for what harm is here. But if you're raised in a community where like that's not the standard, where
no one even yells,
then you're completely like, what is going on, right? But if you're raised on this threshold, that you don't even see that as violence.
Yeah, and you see it's an expectation that this is the way we communicate. Oh, it's fine because this is the way we communicate. And I'm like, whoa, but like, what does that psychologically do to us over time? And then also, I think about very often when you're in your first good relationship, right? Jesus. Whatever that is. But, when you're in their first relationship that feels more mature with a person who can like appropriately communicate with you is tender. And you have been conditioned to fight.
Yes, come on, say it.
And you're like, no, but I don't like. And they're like, I'm sorry that you feel that way. I'm sorry that I invalidated you. And you're like,
what?
Now what?
Because it's boring. It's also like, because you're almost like, I'm very cautious about the language of addiction, but it's almost like you're pulled into the churning and the chaos. And so when the chaos is not present, you don't know how to relate because relating in home and intimacy, the way it was modeled for you is through that chaos. And so you're just like, what is this? This isn't real. Y'all can't be real. Y'all fake because this ain't this. This ain't
for me,
this.
the first time that happened, I just remembered like the anger and the rage was in my body still, even though the conflict was over.
Yeah.
And I was like, so what am I supposed to do with that? Where does this go now? Because usually where it goes is we go back and forth.
Yep.
And then one of us goes, I'm tired of it, whatever the dynamics are, right? And then it's over because someone walked away. But when no one walks away,
people
and it's over because someone apologized, but you still got all this churning, you like, and they like, so are you want to watch a movie now? And you're like, no, I don't even know how to sit still right now. Like, I don't know how to be with this. And I think a lot of times when we're in our first like adult relationships and our first, like healing journey relationships, that is so challenging.
It's disorienting. Because now you have the space. What happens is like, when you get into a dynamic, whether it's a romantic or even non-romantic, sometimes friendships, you get into a dynamic where like there is space and tenderness and care, and you haven't been in spaces like that, it's like now all of your stuff has an opportunity to rise to the surface, and you become more aware, like, oh wait, I am actually really traumatized by how much men have lied to me and gaslit me. And now I'm starting to look for ways in which gaslighting and lying are happening in your behavior. I'm starting to even like, because that's about our brain. That's our fear response, our trauma response. Our brains are literally like, this feels familiar. So, so it starts looking for the alert. And sometimes what happens with trauma, as we know, is that it distorts our vision. So we start seeing things through that lens, and we're looking at like, oh, that hat is purple. Like, girl, that's a pink hat. But you see purple, you're like, no, it's purple. I know it's purple. Then you find out it's pink, and you're feeling like, oh my goodness, right? Because you've been conditioned in an environment where lying and dishonesty and betrayal and all those things are so enmeshed that this feels foreign.
And that oftentimes we're not naming it those things.
Yeah. We're naming it just the culture. Like, this is what the way things are.
Right. We just say like, oh, he ain't shit.
Yeah.
Or like, oh, I'm off that. Or what? We just name it some like phrase. But we don't say, like, I actually felt betrayed.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think about cheating culture, right? And how often people are cheating on each other and breaking the kind of trust and agreements that they've made with each other. Yeah. And we just go like, oh, that's how that is. I hear women say all the time, I expect to be cheated on. I just don't want to be embarrassed. Yeah. But I expect to be cheated on. And I'm like, what? Yeah. If this is what we got to expect, like...
It's like we can't expect, it's almost as if we believe that the expectation that someone would communicate to me their sexual needs, communicate to me what they need or what they want. That is so unrealistic and wild that I have to accustom myself to betrayal and dishonesty, which has always been a big thing for me. Cause I'm just like, a struggle for me. Like, cause I'm always like, look, I've been in relationships. I'm like, if I want to have sex with somebody else, I'll have a conversation with you. Let you know, hey, look, we might need to break this off.
Here's the thing.
Because to me, relationships are contracts.
Yeah.
So just like any other contract, you put in the clauses that you need for your well-being. And if somebody don't want to sign that contract, don't sign on. Right. If my contract says, guess what? I am in a polydynamic, I'm monogamous or whatever, or I need to have a weekend in Rio for the whatever.
Lord.
Like, I would rather have the upfront honesty than live my life under the high blood pressure producing anxiety, depression producing sneakiness of hiding and lying and pretending like it's not and being dishonest. Because that destroys families. And I think that what pisses me off a lot about that, the cheating culture thing, is I have some of the people I see on Twitter and social media talk all this shit about caring about mental health. I said, there are a few things that destroy people's self-esteem and sense of self-worth than betrayal, than dishonesty, than like manipulation. And on one hand, you're saying, oh, mental health, but everything you promote otherwise is about this level of dishonesty. It's not encouraging men, women, or all of us to be like, say it with your chest and live it with your chest.
And living it with our chest is hard if we ain't done no work.
That's true.
Right? You get in these dynamics, and I think about that as it relates to sex, right? One of the things that I established pretty early on in my like sexual life was having a pre and post sex conversation. And almost 99% of the people that I have slept with, shout out to y'all, you're winning. But in all seriousness, 99% of people are like, you want to talk about it before? And then you also want to talk about it after. Like, what we finna talk about? And I'm like, pleasure, what you like. And for me, I'm like, if you can't articulate what feels good to you, what consent means, if you can't like communicate those things, then how do I know that I'm actually holding you in dignity? Yeah. How do I actually know at the end of this that this has been a pleasurable experience? Or do we just do whatever our bodies do and then we dip and just go, well, it was what it was. It was what it was. And I think, and for me, I'm like, I'm not satisfied with that low bar. I'm like, I want a full experience. I want to forget about all the other things that's happening. I want to be like, oh, yes, this was the thing I wanted to do today. And if I don't feel like that, I'm kind of like, okay, I get. Like, if we can't lock in, what are we doing?
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I think like dating black gay men and queer men, that has been rough, right? Because I feel like a lot of black men, so much of the self-esteem is built on sex. Like you may not have a job, you may not have the money, but I can lay it down.
Or we're all saying we can lay it down. Because there's a lot of people saying they lay it down.
They think they can lay it down.
And I got some receipts that say other things, is all I'm saying.
So, but that's the whole thing. A lot of black men, but what ends up happening is the reason they want to ask the question is because they don't want to find out that they actually can't lay it down. Because your self-esteem is built on this kind of like shaky system of not asking, assuming, like, all the performative orgasms, you know what I mean? Like, because I performed some orgasms too. I'm like, bruh, this needs to be over.
Awards.
I'm about to give you,
awards.
I've got Soul Train Awards. It was like best performance of a fake ass orgasm with this trifling Yolo Akili. Like, you know what I mean? Like, literally. I was up there with Ashanti, like, what you got? I was like, not like,
oh my God.
Not with Ashanti, but she got a Soul Train Award one time.
I understand.
But no, I think that, like, what's interesting, even talking about that, like, I remember even in my early sex life, like, I'm short, I'm like, moderately light-skinned, I don't know, whatever you want to call it.
Depends on what color.
Depends on what color I'm like, right? And, really being pushed into being like, oh, you must like receptive anal sex. And that was really really being like, and me being like, I don't know if I like that.
But I don't know yet.
But gay culture,
that's what y'all telling me.
Gay culture being like, this is what you will like. This is what you will enjoy. And I remember like having sex and being like, this kind of wasn't it. But I remember this is such an interesting intersection. I think we talked about this before. One of my good girlfriends, straight woman, and I remember telling her, I was like, hey, look, I have sex with this dude and I didn't like it that much. He said, oh, you're not supposed to like it. You like it because he likes it. That's how penetration is. And I was like, oh shit. And I'm in college thinking this. And thinking that, and for years thought that was like, oh yeah, you just like, they like it and you ain't supposed to like it. You're supposed to like it because they like it. But I know it's so deep, right? Because then you think about like straight women and orgasms and the levels, the low levels of straight women who actually have orgasms, right? I'm thinking about that. Low. The numbers is low. Then you're thinking about the ways in which also women and receptive sexual partners are conditioned to not really like what's happening, but to just give pleasure to whoever's down,
but
quote
also
unquote,
because no
whatever.
one is talking, and not no one. I know these are, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. But like, how many people are actually talking about and can say, this is what feels pleasurable to my body. Yeah. I like this kind of touch. Yeah. And equally, if you shared that with your partner, would they be receptive? Yeah. Because I've shared with partners, hey, I don't really like when you do X, Y, Z, like the intensity, or I don't like this thing or whatever. And they're like, well, that's what I do. And I'd be like, well, then you got to do it with somebody else because this ain't that. I don't want that. And now we at an impasse because what you thought was a vibe, I now have feedback for.
You know, it's so interesting because I think across like sexual orientation in the Black community and gender identity, many of us just don't get, so we learn about how to have sex from porn. Oh, right? And what sex should look like from porn. If we're honest,
that's
our
a
sexual
video
education.
Shoot. They're trying to get the best light.
They're trying to get the best light and make it happen.
It's not about pleasure.
But what happens is a lot of people are trying to get into that performative ritual. I can tell you how many times I've had casual intimacy with people. I'm like, you can feel the script. Okay, I'm doing this. To the left, to the right. Like you can feel the omnipresent camera there because we're doing the script and we're not actually honoring what we like. We're not communicating about what we like. We haven't explored it. And I think that like there's a lot of fear about talking about it. I'd be like, so tell me how was that for you? Oh, why you want to talk about it? I'm like, wait, what? Like, let's just have a conversation. Because I think, once again, sex is a very, like a lot of folks hold a lot of shame around sex, a lot of fear of hearing things about sex, and so like it's tricky for people.
Oh, of course. And not to say that it is not tricky for us.
Right, yeah.
Absolutely. Right? I think about that a lot of my sexual history is tainted by sexual violence. Yeah. Right? That at a very early age, that was my introduction to pleasure, right? Is being molested as a young person, right? And thinking about the many, many times that has happened in adulthood, right? Where I'm like, I did not say yes. This is not what was happening. And now you've put me in this awkward ass position to have to either physically fight you or to take the L and be like, here we go again with another person who is not trying to be present understand isn't like I'm an object. I'm not a whole human, right? I ain't got no heartbeat. I'm just a thing for you to be experiencing right now. And I think about how I've had to work through so much of that trauma around like some of those sexual experiences being violent and others being things where it's like stealthing, right? Where it's like we agree to use a condom and then I discover, oh, you actually took it off in the midst of this. And now I'm left unprotected, number one. And number two, like, I ain't agree to this. Now you done created now I got to get the plan B. Now you've made my life so much more complicated. And are you willing to take responsibility for that's what's happened? And I think in the experience of like having this experience of being stealthed, I went back to him and I was like, hey, so I just want to like check in the next day. And I said, what was the experience like for you? And he was like, this was amazing. And I'm so excited and so glad we're dating. And I was like, well, I have to be honest. That was not my experience at all. And he was like, well, what do you mean? And I was like, well, I agreed to have sex with a condom and later discovered that that's not actually what happened fully. And so like, that's not okay with me. And he's like, well, what are you trying to say? And I was like, exactly what I said. That like the agreement was broken and now you've put me in a risk that I was not willing to have. And now have put me in a position to potentially be pregnant, to be potentially exposed to STDs, to be potentially all kinds of things. Are you prepared to be responsible for whatever comes from that decision? And he was like, well, I'm not one of those dudes. No one's ever said that I'm that kind of person. And I said, I recognize that like we have a culture that says the dude who rapes people and the dude who is somebody else.
Yeah.
And, sir, today that somebody is you. And so just because nobody else had the bravery to have this conversation with you, it's actually happened to me so many times that I am now brave enough to say, you have absolutely violated me. You have absolutely put me in a position that I did not desire to be in. And we're going to talk about responsibility now. And it was like this whole moment where I said, this doesn't have to be a ruined experience. It could be an experience that we learn and grow through. But are you ready for that? He ain't ready for that. But that was the opportunity, right? I was like, you're in therapy. I want to encourage you to talk to your therapist about this experience. What's the point of having a therapist if you're not really willing to talk about what's actually happening? Ain't gonna be no actual growth here. And this delusion that we are not the people that we actually are, that ain't real. Yeah. And at what point do we get with the reality and also stop harming other people in the midst of our own dysfunction?
Yeah. And it's first of all, like, you sharing that is like, brings up so much, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like so many experiences and so many women who tell the stories, and not even just women, people talking about those experiences. And there's so many things I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about the ways in which we have normalized for Black women and many Black women that is to be expected.
Absolutely.
That is acceptable as a norm. That like, I remember I have a friend years ago who told me, she was like, I didn't realize, when she started dating women, she talks about this experience, not to say that women are better than men or whatever. She says, there was a way that I didn't realize men were relating to my body, that I didn't realize how disturbing it was until I was with a woman who was loving to me. And I was like, whoa. And I think about that because I think about the mental health and wellness of Black women and how the ways in which Black men and anybody who's having sex with Black women relates to Black women's bodies in this deeply misogynistic, deeply alienating, deeply disrespectful way that can—
and just
entitlement.
Like, what if I don't want to be devoured? What if I actually want tenderness? What if I actually want love? You got that? Yeah. Or you just only got your machismo. Yo, I'm about to prove something. Like all the ways that we talk about sex, right? Oh, I'm about to tear it up.
Yeah, no.
I'm about to, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Also, like, are you 13? Like, can you come with something more than that?
It's also weird too dating the guys where like when they start talking about sex, they revert to 12. You be like, why do you revert to 12 years old? Like, ooh, pussy. I'm like, okay, wow. What just happened? What the fuck just happened? Why did you become 16 all of again? You are a 40-year-old man.
Or we can't name genitalia what they're actually named, right? Like, there's this whole thing that happens that we each get caught in at some point, right? Where we have to like interrogate, like, oh, is this actually the kind of experience that I want to be having? Is this, and I think about as people transition into like an age or time in their life when they like want to be married and are going to have sex with the same person potentially for many, many years, right? That changes the ways in which you finna navigate this. When you start having kids, oh, all this, we about to break it down. We finna, okay, right, with your 2-year-old busting in a room. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, where is the practical version of intimacy, not just sex, but intimacy? And do we only see it as penetration? Do we only see it as porno style?
Yep. Let me tell you, child, like one of my biggest beefs, and I know the gays gonna get on me, I absolutely loathe and detest, and I struggle with the ways in which gay men particularly have been taught to like socialize their sexuality into bottom and top. Because when somebody's like, I'm a top or a bottom, that tells me shit about what you like. It tells me nothing about what you sexually enjoy. And the idea that I had to center my whole sexuality around this act.
Just the one thing.
The one thing has always been like, I do a lot of other things in sex that like aren't related to that. So why I don't call myself, I built an identity around my nipple licking. That's not happening. Okay. Well, like, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, we're going to be honest. We're going to say the things.
There was a man who I
did. Okay.
Anyway. There was a whole thing with his nipples, but I was like, okay.
But for me, it's like, I want to create space where it's like I get to know your body and get to know you, and I want you to know me sexually. But like sometimes these rigid labels, which are really transactional, they're really for transactional intimacy, right? I can just get this what I want, which is fine. So, but I loathe
There's
them.
a place for that.
But I loathe really how they've been connected to gendered and like all these assumptions about you. Like it's like, oh, so you like to use your penis in sex. That means you are blah, 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 which often aligns with dominant, heterocentric, you a masculine person, and the other, and vice versa, right? And then like all the ways in which that, because I think about the ways in which when I was like really having more receptive intimacy, the ways in which it was so deeply aligned with like deeply misogynistic thinking that Black women were often hearing too. It was just like the same narratives I would get, like about shame, like, okay, like why you letting them run up in you? Like, you know what I mean? Like all this stuff, it was like, wait a second, like, what if can I like sex?
Right.
Can I enjoy sex? Can I be an agent in sex? You know what I mean?
No voice, just do what they're doing.
Just give them away, give away something to someone, right? Like, as opposed to like, well, I'm getting something too that I want, right? Even all that framework, it's just like, it's so deeply not about building connection and building trust. Because I think when you build connection and trust and intimacy, you got questions that go beyond those labels and those layers.
Way beyond
You got
that.
a lot of other thought to go there, but I think there's a lot of fear and anxiety around that, like I said, because I think a lot of Black men and Black women, the self-esteem is built around the idea of how I am in sex. I can throw it down, and if you question it, then everything else falls apart around it.
But I also think in hetero relationships, I think that for women, I think the same thing is true. We need to be pretty and open to whatever you want to do. Otherwise, we get traded in for the newest model. Yeah. And, I'm bi, so I have the experience of having experiences with both with men and women. And, I really resonate with this idea of like that sex with women is totally different. Like it is a whole experience. It is, for me, it is a whole experience. It is loving. And it's not just about specific body parts. It's about the whole human. And I think that there's something, to me, really delicious about the tenderness and the expansiveness of that I wish more straight men would like be open to having, because there's something you're missing when you're just P in the B.
Performing.
When we're just like in the mirror, like doing things. It's like, I don't know, bro. Like, I just feel like I want more for you. I want more for you.
It's like a goal-based and a performance-based sex. Like when the goal of the sex is to perform and like be for something, as opposed to be present, be connected, be intimate, be listening to your body, listen to each other's bodies, right? And I think that that's not the norm for what we, because I mean, think about the music we listen to, everything. It's all about like domination or the performance of domination, which I want to name is different from domination, right?
Yeah.
I think we often get it confused in our culture. We think that like, domination is rape. The performance of domination, if I perform and act with you in the act of performing this domination, that's different. That's a performance.
Yeah.
That is a consent-based, that is acting.
Yeah.
And I think that like a lot of niggas run around here thinking like, oh, no. There's a difference, bro.
You're acting.
We're acting, and I'm acting for you to make you feel a certain kind of way.
Some folks rape people, but also
some raping people, yes, there's also like acting, right? Like, and I think making those distinctions is something we don't see happen in the culture and in conversations, you know? Like even myself, like, As a survivor, I think about when I told other black gay men or black gay men about being sexually assaulted, it was kind of just shrugged off. Like, and I remember being the culture, there's this kind of underlying thing with gay men particularly where it's like all men want sex so you can't be raped. And you can see, and it plays out in all different kind of ways, things I hear gay men say. I'm like, wait a second, what? And so when you say that, like, oh, like even like going to clubs and spaces, like as a shorter person, I've had that experience in the past where like, men roll up on you and want to be aggressive with you and die. Like, what the fuck is happening right now?
Baby,
like
that roll up and you like, yo, you are too close.
What's happening?
Too much is going on, and ain't nobody said they wanted any of this.
But those acts and those things are seen as like desirable. You're supposed to find that attractive.
Yeah.
You're supposed to find that, like, you're supposed to want that.
You feel chosen.
You feel chosen once again, like, oh, you chose me.
Of all the people in this club, I'm the one that you wanted to roll up on.
You chose me over the sock you had under your bed last night. Like, basically, let's keep it 100. Like, you know what I mean? Like, like this culture of like, it's just a culture of disconnection.
Yeah.
It's not a culture of intimacy.
And it's the desire for connection.
Yes.
Without the bravery
come on
to
now.
do the work to be connected.
Ooh, come on.
And that is what is so unappealing to me because I'm like, if we doing this human shit, let's do it.
Yeah.
What's all the stuff?
Yeah.
Let's bump up against each other.
But I think that like having dated so many people and men and like I think that like
so many people.
So many people, man. Oh Lord Jesus, I've dated them. Actually, I've not dated that many.
I feel like there's numbers.
No, but I actually feel like I don't. I said that I've dated people, but I feel like one thing I'm not very good at dating because I tend to be like, and I think we have this in common. I can spend 10 seconds with you and I'm like, nope.
It's a no for me.
And like, I don't need to like, I'm not that person. I admire people who are like, I went on an exploration with someone and did a whole time.
No, I used to be the exploration.
I can't, I'm like,
I used to be in it for the story.
Right.
Number one. And number two, I used to be like, well, maybe.
I don't have time.
And what I realized about that maybe is it's bullshit, number one.
It's bullshit.
And number two, it doesn't ultimately serve me if I'm compromising from the jump. At the door of meeting you, I'm going, well, maybe I didn't like this thing, but maybe if this and it's like all this, and now I done beat myself out of what I actually want.
What I actually feel.
Right.
Because what do I feel when I'm in your presence?
Ooh.
What do I feel when I'm around you? Do I feel integrity? Do I feel connected? Do I feel alignment? Do I feel nourished and supported? And understand that's not gonna be the same way all the time. But if I don't feel some dimension of that, why am I engaging you? So like one thing one of my friends critiqued me about it is like, you don't do just random dates. I'm like, one, I also struggle with this with like, gay men in particular. It's like, my standard of human engagement is so high for most gay male cultures. So sometimes, because I feel like you just like, hi, are you a person? I would like to talk to you and get to know you. They're like, oh, you must be in love with me. No. That's just a different standard than what you all, because you all don't treat each other like human beings. You just like sacks of meat. And then what happens is somebody comes in is kind to you as a human being. You think I'm in love with you. I'm like, actually, that's just like different.
I just said hello.
I just said hello.
Yeah.
I said, how you feeling? I express interest in you as a human living being. And the culture of pain, I think in so many queer communities is so deep, so much trauma, so much sadness, so much depression that is masked as fabulous, that is masked as mean girlness. And it's like hiding all this stuff that shows up in how the sex and the intimacy doesn't show up in it.
Craving the intimacy. And so you become big and bold and beautiful to attract something that feels like something.
But it makes me think about something I really made a choice of in my life a long time ago. I was like, I used to be so attracted to the image. The image of like, the Instagram, Facebook post. But I had the Instagram, Facebook post and it felt like hell. And then I started being like, oh, I want to have a relationship that feels good. That feels good. Like, I don't care how it looks to you. I don't care if it doesn't look like it could be on the cover of Ebony or Jet magazine. I don't care, because it feels good to me.
I mean, I also do want it to be slightly cute.
Okay.
You know
I mean, it can be
like,
cute, but I'm saying like not recognizable. It might not be recognizable to you in the way in which you understand dynamics of relationships. But I want to feel good because I've lived the hell of trying to pretzel myself into the image of some man or whoever else wants me to be.
Yeah, been there. Glad to not be there anymore.
Amen to that.
Glad to not be there anymore. I'm curious, as we close out, what's your takeaway? What's the mantra, affirmation that you are reminded of, that you are calling forth as it relates to your sexual wellness, to relationships, to love?
Ooh, it's such a good question. What am I calling forth? I think for myself, I feel grateful to say that I'm in a part of my journey where I'm able to engage intimacy and having intimacy that feels more connected and true to me than ever. Because I feel like if one of the biggest, the biggest lie that I've told the people I have dated and been romantic with, and I'm sorry, y'all, has been mostly around the intimacy and the level of enjoyment I actually had of it. Because I think for a long time I lied to people please because like I didn't think that, I didn't have the courage to say this is what I want and what I enjoy. I didn't feel like I was worthy of even having what I want and what I enjoy. I felt very pushed and molded. This is what you're gonna like, and just endured. And so I think the affirmation for me is that like, I can have the pleasure that I desire. I can have the connection that I desire. I would rather have quality over quantity. I'd rather have one quality connection than have 15 terrible, dismissive connections.
Or just shallow.
Shallow, right? And so for me, it's affirming I can have the pleasure that I desire. I can feel nourished in my sex, sexual intimacy. I can perform or shoot consensually. I can engage in all these different ways. And I can do that with integrity. I can do that with conversation, with communication. That's possible for my sexuality.
I love that.
What about for you?
I think for me, I am holding a vision for a love that is rich, that is kind, and that is on purpose. That is about choosing each other and being aligned because we want to be, not because we just don't have shit else going on, right? And that is the vision I'm holding for myself. And wish that for everybody, really, is a love that feels good for real in the best and worst of days. That we have a love that holds us, that sees us fully.
I love that. I love that. That's the affirmation. That's the call. Like, I think that like to our people who are watching, who are listening, I hope that like, hearing our stories, which are, our realities, our truths, are helping you to reflect upon your own truth and call into yourself to say, you can have a different kind of intimacy that feels good for you, or you can expand the intimacy that you already have that feels good to you. I want to invite you to reimagine and think, how could my body feel differently? How could I find more joy, more pleasure, more orgasm, whatever that is you need or you want, in a way that is loving, in a way that is in integrity? I want to invite all the folks who are listening to remix and reimagine sexuality and sex for yourself, and think about how you can do that in a healing justice frame and in a loving frame.
I love that. Well, we're excited for the journey we're all on.
All right.
We love you. We're rooting for you.
Hot girl summer. I'm sorry.
It's a mild girl summer over here. But we'll see you next time.
Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Yolo, and I'm back with another practice that you can use on your healing journey. Today, I want to do something a little simple that you can carry with you wherever you are, and it is a practice called box breathing. So to frame this practice, imagine a square, and on each side of that square is the number 4, right? What we will do, we will inhale deeply for 4 seconds, then hold for 4 seconds, then exhale for 4 seconds, and then repeat. This is a simple practice, and our breath is one of the most powerful tools that we have to help ourselves regulate and manage our nervous systems, right? And so I want to invite you to practice and try this with me, okay? Now, a couple of tips here. When you inhale, I want to invite you to inhale through your nose and fill your belly. And then when you exhale, I want to invite you to exhale through your mouth and make as much noise as you need as you push out that air, or maybe even metaphorically, anything you need to release, okay? So we want to try it together. Simple practice, right? So first thing we'll do, we'll start with inhaling. I will count 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'll instruct you, and we'll go from there, all right? So when you're ready, wherever you are, we want to start with a deep breath, inhaling through our nose for 1, 2, 3, 4, holding, 2, 3, 4, exhaling, 2, 3, 4. Want to pause right there. Give yourself a moment to feel how that felt. Sometimes when we're new to breath work, it can feel a little different. So I want to invite you to just be present with that. And we're going to do it one last time, right? Once again, reminding you that when you inhale, we want to inhale deeply through our nose, filling our belly. And then we want to exhale through our mouth, making as much noise as we would like. All right? So now we'll get started again. Inhale through your nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold your breath. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Simple, sweet, don't cost you nothing. You can't cash at me though, but it doesn't cost you anything to practice with your breath. So think about that in your moments when you may be experiencing stress. Think about that just in your everyday life. How can I take a moment to just breathe? Because oftentimes we're not present in our bodies, and our breath helps us get back here when we're disconnected, right? So try it, check it out. And if it doesn't work for you, that's good. There's lots of other practices and tools that you can try as well. I'm Yolo, and thank you again for joining me.